There's this moment I think we all have in our lives, and we've been exploring this the last little while. For me, I sat with my brother and sister on a call recently. My dad's getting to be end of life stuff. We're trying to navigate how do you support. And I said to my brother and sister, I said, I have 3 goals in this time of my life. I want to take care of my dad. I think we all want that. I said, I want to deal with my own demons that I grew up with, all the wounds that I have as a child. I want to start healing those. And I want to become closer to you, my siblings. I don't want this to pull us apart. I want this to create connection. It was heartfelt. I truly believe that's what I want, which is strange because a week ago, I was out in the mountains snowbiking, and what was going through my head was, screw those two. I'm going to do whatever I want. And for about an hour of snowbiking, my brain was coming up with all the reasons why that completely makes sense. You know those moments where you're like, oh, I was going to go to the gym, but then you have another voice that says, oh, I'm tired, or I've had a long week, or I deserve to have a break, or you know those, don't put up your hand, but you know those moments? The moment that says, I'm going to save my money while you're surfing on Temu looking for something new. Why is it that we can have, I want to get closer to my siblings. I'm going to blow them off and just do whatever I want and screw them. How do we have that at the same time? How is it that our lives, our inner lives, are so fractured? But it's not that even. It's not the how. It's the train wreck of when. I want this, and my behavior is exactly the opposite of that. I swore I would never, and yet I find myself doing that very thing. And the impact on our lives, the impact on our self-worth, the impact on the people around us. I know we've talked about this quite a bit lately, but I'm fascinated is the wrong word. Horrified, troubled by what's going on inside of our heads that's undermining the very thing we want. People often say to me, Vince, no. That's not what's going on inside of me. I'm a single, unified human being. I thought that too while I was snowbiking and thinking about how I could screw over my brother and sister. I had one single thought in my head, without regards for what it was going to do to me. Without regards of what it was going to do to my relationship with my brother and sister. You can feel that tension inside, can't you? You probably can even feel when you go against your values, you go against the things, your goals, you go against who you are. And then you're dealing with that for the next 2 weeks. I will never yell at my kids, and now you're apologizing for yelling at your kids. How do we navigate this? How do we not get stuck in this cycle of not doing the very thing we want to do? This probably sounds familiar. We've been talking about this idea of parts. It's a story. It's a mental model. It says that we're all kind of broken up in these different things. Parts, the definition is a story that conceptualizes our inner life with separate parts that have different agendas, different feelings, and also different level of agency. I have a part that wants my relationship with my brother and sister to be very, very good, and promises that I will do what I can to grow that relationship. I have another part that couldn't give 2 craps about that. it'd burn them in a second. How is it that I could have that much difference inside of me? How could you have that much difference inside of you? Now, parts is just a story, but there's some truth actually to this. I want to show you. There's a test called the Stoop, S-T-O-O-P, Stoop effect. Can you throw up the first slide for me? Tell me what color that font is. Do you notice how your brain has to go, don't say red, it's blue. There's a part of you that wants to say the color that's written up there, and there's another part of you that knows that's not the answer. Can you feel that tension inside of you? That's kind of what parts are like. There's a part of you that wants to say red, and there's another part of you that knows that red's not the right answer. It's actually blue. So this metaphor, this story, this conceptualization of us having internal parts that are different and have different agendas and have different ways of seeing the world, it kind of fits, doesn't it? Last series we did, there's a framework called immunity to change. It's a way of looking at the world through this parts language, but they gave us something more. They said, okay, we have this parts idea. Remember I was up here on stage and I had a bunch of elastic bands attached to me, and I'm trying to make this change, and I have a bunch of parts that are trying to keep me from making the very change I want. The idea is, it's like I want to work out 6 days a week, and I have another part that's saying, we're just going to sit on the couch all those days. And that part will literally try and pull me back out of the very change I want to make. That's the concept of immunity to change. Now, the beauty of that book, the genius of that book, is they asked us a question about our parts. They said, what do your parts believe? Can you throw up the... So we have these parts that say, I want to do this. I want to be a better spouse. I want to do better in my job. I want to, get healthier. Get my finances lined up. And then we have a part that's designed to do the exact opposite for us. Or there's a part that's not designed. That's the wrong word. There's a part that exists who pulls in the opposite direction. It's why change is so hard to make. And yet, if we understand what that part believes, everything shifts. With my family, with my siblings, I have a part that says I want my relationship with them to be good. I've seen so many families break apart through kind of times like this. I do not want that in my family. But what does this part believe? What does this part think? This part thinks that if I have control, everything will go better. That's what it believes. And it will wrestle control from my family because it has this belief that says, no, screw them, you know better. This sounds really bad when I say it out loud. It's okay, all of our parts, when you say it out loud, it's like, oh my goodness. But finding the beliefs of those parts is incredibly hard, isn't it? I can sit up here and say we have these parts that are pulling back. You just got to know the beliefs of those parts. Do you know why you don't like conflict? Do you know why more information makes you feel calm? Do you know why using makes you feel better about life? Do you know the beliefs? Because I don't most of the time. Just my life turns into a train wreck, and then I'm going, what just happened? So if that's the goal, if that's our North Star, how do we get there? How do we see what we can't see? How do we become conscious of our unconscious? That's like one of those Zen proverbs of like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it actually make a sound? How do you become conscious of your unconscious? If your unconscious is the thing that's undermining your values and your goals and your happiness and your relationships, how do you see them? By definition, they're unconscious. I've become obsessed with this. Today, can you throw up the model for me? Today, we're going to work on the I portion of our model. Oftentimes, taking water is beautiful. Even this we, conceptually, it's beautiful. But until you understand yourself, until you come to grips with this stuff, until you become conscious of your unconscious, the whole model is built on that. And so oftentimes what we have to do is we have to work on this part of us, figuring out who we are so that I can become the person who can be in a we relationship with other humans. And I can take water in a sustainable way. We were sitting down with a couple. Her mom attends our church. She used to attend our church when she lived in town here. She's now in Vancouver. And she said something kind of off the cuff. She's like, "Oh, Vince, you know that immunity change came out like a few decades ago?" I was like, "What? This stuff's been around for that long and I didn't know about it?" Seems not completely odd. But then I started realizing I actually think this idea is older than that. There's a writer named Paul who I think is dealing with what we're dealing with. He said this. Can you write this up? He was writing to a church called a church in Rome. So it's the letter to the Romans. He says this: "I don't understand my own actions, for I don't do what I should, but I do the very thing I hate." How much of our lives are that? I love it. And then he says, "I can feel something deep inside of me trying to keep me doing the things I don't want to do." This is a paraphrase. If you grew up in Sunday school, I don't know, can I just ask, how many of you were influenced by Sunday school growing up? Anyone? Can you just throw up your hand for me? No Sunday school whatsoever? Any of those people? We call you guys pure. You don't have to deconstruct a bunch of stuff. It's just like you're pure, innocent, clean. I envy you all. If you grew up in Sunday school, you would have seen a different verse than this. You'd have seen this: "I can feel sin inside of me." When I say the word sin, what comes to mind? Just yell out your answers. Guilt. Shame. What was it? Bad. My coach said, she was a Catholic, she's like, chewing gum in school. I was like, I'm not sure why that was a big deal, but for her, that was sin. Sin was all those things that you do that were bad. Who defined bad in your growing up years? Parents. For me, it was my church tradition. No drinking, no smoking, no sex whatsoever. The drinking one again, so strange. But again, those were sin. And the idea was that sin, this idea of, some people call it missing the mark. They conceptualize God in a way that says there's this character God, and the God created a bunch of rules that your tradition tells you. And if you break the rules, if you sin, this character God is angry at you. And the Jesus story is the solution to that. Okay, let's just put that aside for a second. The reason I didn't put sin up there is because if I said sin, that's where you're going to go. Shame, guilt, whatever. No drinking. But sin has two meanings in the writings of Paul. And the second meaning is the most important meaning today. And this is the piece that if you don't catch this, a lot of the Bible doesn't make any sense. Because this conceptualization of God says, if I make a mistake, God is angry at me. But the other way of looking at sin is something called a force of evil in the world. The idea was that up until just before the Jesus time, the Jewish community, the Israelite community, the ancient people conceptualize God as anything good comes from God, anything bad comes from God. If we as a people are no longer devout, God will send bad things. That's how they conceptualize God. If we're devout, good things. 300 years before Jesus, something happened. The Jews were taken over by the Seleucid Empire, and they were persecuted for their devotion. Can you see the shift? Suddenly, they are the most devout ever, and their lives are hell. Their conceptualization of God said this should never happen. When we're devout, life is good. And so what happened is they shifted their conceptualization of God. This is like, pow. The reason it's not such a big deal for us is because most of us who grew up in a church have this conception already. But this is a complete shift. They said there's forces of good and there's forces of evil now. The forces of good are run by their conceptualization of God. The forces of evil are run by this character called the devil. Bad. But when Paul uses it, he says, he calls this sin. That force that makes me want to completely go against my brother and sister, even though that's the very thing I want. Sin is that force that says, no, I want to get healthy, and yet I'm eating a bag of Doritos. And there's a second bag sitting next to me on the couch. It's that force that says, oh, I can't let this go. I have to snap a crayon on this person. I'm going to yell at them. Or I'm going to have to suppress myself to the point where there's nothing here. He calls that sin. We call it our unconscious. And suddenly this parts work, I realize Paul was doing this work long before we came along. He just called it something different. At the heart of our tradition, at the heart of the Christian story is this idea that says when we become conscious of those things that are pulling us off of our values, off of our purpose, off the things we desire, that force is called sin. And there's a battle between the forces of good inside of me and the forces of sin. Again, some people conceptualize this as an actual force of like demons on your shoulder. You know, we have that meme, angels, devils, right? It's all from this. So the question then becomes, how do we see that force when it's active? And how do we deal with that force so that we live the lives we truly want? It's seeing that force that's the hard part, isn't it? When I was on my snow bike, all I could think about was, I'm going to screw them over. In fact, I have a part in my brain that says to me, you have to screw them over. It's the right answer. In fact, it's the best for them and for you. Anyone have that, the voice that's trying to tell you that force isn't actually the force at play? This is just logical. This is just the right answer. This is the only way to go. So how do we see it? You know who taught me one of the ways to see it? My wife. If you ever want to learn about yourself and your unconscious, partner with somebody. Partner with 3 people. They will show you stuff about yourself that you don't necessarily want to learn, but you probably need to. We had this situation come up. And my wife goes to the deepest, darkest, negative possible scenario. It used to drive me nuts. Because I just assume everything's going to work out. Optimism. Shouldn't everyone be optimistic? Of course they should. So why isn't my wife being optimistic? Normally this would just spark a fight. One day I asked her, why do you do that? And in a moment of genius clarity, she said, when I can live in the worst case scenario, I can handle anything after that. That floored me. I always thought she was doing it wrong. Because my story is so clear and so, the voice in my head says, no, this isn't a story. You're just doing it right. You're optimistic. Everyone should be optimistic. What my wife showed me is, no. She's dealing with hope. Once I can live in the worst case scenario, anything can happen and I can handle it. It can go down the toilet and I can handle it. And if it goes better than that, that's a win. Whereas I'm like, no, it's going to go awesome. And then when it doesn't go perfectly awesome, I'm frustrated, I'm mad. And I realized, wait, her story actually has some strengths that mine doesn't. But because I'm optimistic, I assumed, and the story inside my head says, I'm right, she's wrong. You see, seeing her story helped me see my story. Seeing how she answers the question, what is the future going to hold? Helps me realize I have a story about that. It's just unconscious. I can't see it until I see how the story plays out against somebody else. Suddenly I realize, can you throw back up the table for me? In the immunity to change model, what beliefs do these parts have? My part has a belief that the world is going to work out, and it never thinks, what happens if it doesn't? I'm just depressed and mad and trying to steal control. And so now what we see why I was trying to take or do something to my siblings that we never agreed to. Because I have a story. If you can see your story, you can see your unconscious parts. Because they hold the story. This is the genius from my wife. If you can see the story your parts hold, if you can see the story, you'll see the story the parts hold, and you'll start to watch, how does it impact me in the rest of my life? I think most of the Bible is actually not theology. The theology is the study of God. I think most of the Bible is psychology and sociology, written in a time before that stuff existed. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, who are we? And part of it is, what unconscious parts hijack us? So here's what we're going to do this whole series. There's the first 11 chapters of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. We call it the primeval history. It's written in a genre that nothing else in the Bible is written in. If people live to 999 years, there's they build a tower to the universe, there's a creation narratives. It's all these stories that are just fantastical. Some people think they're literal. 999 years old. Again, I'll let you deal with that. You can buy me a beer and we can argue that one out. I think they're in a genre called etiology, which means they're trying to show us something of this moment in a story. And if they're doing that, what they're doing is they're trying to figure out how to tell you something about your life, something about your unconscious. Next week, we're going to ask the question, is the world on this kind of a trajectory going up or down? How your brain answers that question will tell you something about your unconscious parts. Once you realize, my brain likes to think of it going up, my brain likes to think of it going down, not reality. Again, you have a part of your brain that's going to say, no, Vince, there's no story here. I know the truth. The world is going down or up, right? This is not a story, this is just truth. We have a friend who every time she says truth, she goes like this, truth. But what if it's a story? And what if that story tells you something about the belief of your core parts that you're not conscious of? And as you become conscious of them, you realize when they try and take over. And suddenly we have an antidote to the train wreck of our unconscious taking over our conscious. But we have to see the stories, the beliefs our parts hold. And I think our spiritual ancestors did this through story. So we're going to examine 3 stories. Your work is going to be going, okay, do I think of it like this or like this? There's not a right answer. We're going to explore both parts as a way to help you understand your unconscious. As a way to figure out that spiritual work, of figuring out the forces inside of us that are trying to hijack us and take us in a different place. So if you're like me, and you've had a moment where you're going, what in the world just happened inside of me? I promised I would do this. I swore I'd do this. This is not who I am. I had a moment the other day, me and my wife, I just freaked out. Just like lost it. I had an unconscious part take over. It's not unconscious. I took years and years of therapy. I have a part I call it my avoidant attachment part. It sits right over here. It has a belief. No one will ever take care of you. That's its belief. I didn't know it had that belief until my counselor told me. If you're an anxious attached, you have a different voice. Your voice says, no one will ever stick around. Everybody will leave me. When my avoidant part gets poked, I go nuclear. Nuclear. That part will burn my life down in a second. I learned that part going through my divorce. It's mildly conscious. Usually it's conscious about 6 hours of sleeplessness until I finally realized, oh wait, that part is running my life right now. Oh, okay, buddy. Could it be that the most spiritual work for us today is to become conscious of the unconscious? If I can use Paul's language, to find the force of evil he calls sin, that's causing us to do the very things we don't want to do. Could it be that the heart of our spiritual journey, our ability to stay in our ability to take water, is tied to this piece that says, I become conscious of all the forces inside of me so that I can be the human I want to be. I can be the partner I want to be. The friend, the family member. May we take these next 3 weeks and do the incredible hard work of making the unconscious, conscious. We're going to start next week with, is the world getting better or worse? If I can give you homework, your homework is this. Watch this whole week. Which news are you attracted to? Which direction do you think it's going to go? Which times when someone feels one way, you're like angry at them? Which is the one like, no, I just want to listen to them? Start to find your story around which way this world goes. That was an awesome ringtone. Have a great week, everybody.